Please welcome back CEO, Aurora Institute, Susan Patrick.
Hello, good afternoon. Getting ready to kick off the lunchtime keynote TED Talks. 3 extraordinary leaders are illuminating a path forward to show how systems transformation can be done with a commitment to high-quality, student-centered learning for all and an emphasis on educational equity. Each speaker will provide TED Talks, powerful talks drawing on their journeys, offering insights and inspiration on how the work they are leading is transforming education systems in states and regions, connecting communities, and shining a light on the future of learning. Please allow me to share the bios of each speaker up front. First, Jackie Statum Allen joined the Bush Foundation as Education Portfolio Director in 2018. She manages the strategy, programs, and partnerships for the Foundation's education initiative. The focus of this initiative is to make education more relevant for students in terms of who they are, how they learn, and where they want to go. The Foundation serves Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and the 23 Native nations that share the same geography. Prior to her current role, Jackie spent over a decade working in public school district administration. Most recently, she led the Office of Strategic Planning, Policy, and Grants Development for the St. Paul Public Schools. In that role, she led several high-impact projects, including developing and implementing multiple district strategic plans, developing inclusive policies, and managing informational campaigns for referendum ballot initiatives. Prior to SPPS, she worked in operations and budget management with Chicago Public Schools. She also has experience working in brand marketing and manufacturing engineering. Jackie is originally from St. Louis, Missouri. She has a bachelor's degree from Stanford University and a master's degree from Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management. She lives in the Twin Cities with her husband and 2 young daughters. Next up, we have Dr. Kirsten Baesler. Dr. Baesler is the State School Superintendent of North Dakota. In her position, she oversees the education of more than 121,000 public and private school students. She was elected as State School Superintendent in November 2012 and re-elected to her second term in 2016 with 75% of the vote. Before taking office in January 2013, Superintendent Baesler had a 24-year career in Bismarck Public School System as a vice principal, library media specialist, classroom teacher, and instructional assistant. She also worked for the North Dakota School Boards Association as the association's assistant director. Superintendent Baesler served on the Mandan School Board for 9 years. Her colleagues chose her as the president for 7 of the 9 years. She is one of the 9 directors on the board of the Council of Chief State School Officers, the national organization that represents our state education agency chiefs across the nation. CCSSO offers leadership, technical assistance, and advocacy on major education issues. Superintendent is also one of 25 women leaders chosen from across the country for the Governing Institute's 2019 Women in Government Leadership Program. She is a member of more than a dozen boards, including the Education Standards and Practices Board. She earned 2 associate's degrees from Bismarck State College, a bachelor's degree in education from Minot State University, and a master's degree in library and information technology from Valley City State University. She completed the graduate school education leadership program at Harvard University. She lives in Mandan, North Dakota, and has 3 adult sons. And last but not least, Dr. James Lane. Dr. Lane was appointed Virginia's 25th Superintendent of Public Instruction by the Governor of Virginia, effective June 2018. As state superintendent, Dr. Lane serves as the executive officer of the Virginia Department of Ed and secretary of the State Board of Ed. Prior to his appointment, Dr. Lane served as superintendent in Chesterfield County, in Goochland County, and in Middlesex County. He was recognized as the 2017 Virginia Superintendent of the Year for his leadership in Goochland County, Virginia. Dr. Lane was one of 100 superintendents in the nation selected to attend the 2014 Connect Ed Superintendent Summit at the White House in recognition of his leadership in the use of instructional technology by his schools. In 2015, the National Data Quality Campaign awarded its annual Flashlight Award to Goochland County in recognition of the division's achievements under Dr. Lane's leadership in using data to empower educators and communicate with parents and the public. Dr. Lane holds a doctorate in education from the University of Virginia, a master's degree in school administration from North Carolina State University, and a master's and bachelor's degrees in teaching from the University, North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Dr. Lane and his wife, Sarah, are parents of 2 elementary school students in Chesterfield County. Thank you. And now we will turn to our first keynote speaker, positioning the region to be a national leader in student-centered learning, co-creating inclusive learning environments for students from all cultures to be empowered to achieve and succeed. Please join me in a warm welcome to Jackie Statum Allen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It is so good to join you all here today, even if I am interrupting your lunch. My name is Jackie, and actually, before I start my remarks, I would like to invite you all to join me in showing appreciation to the Convention Center staff here today, the folks on the floor and preparing food. Thank you for that. They're taking good care of us. Like I said, my name is Jackie Statum Allen, and I'm the Education Portfolio Director for the Bush Foundation. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the Bush Foundation, I will tell you, we're not the beer, we're not related to the famous baked beans, or either one of the former US presidents. Actually, it was 3M executive Archibald Bush and his wife Edith who established the foundation in 1953. They were inspired by our desire to build community and to encourage innovation. And the Bush Foundation, we invest in great ideas and the people who power them. And we do this to make our region better for everyone. And as Susan said, our region is Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and the 23 Native nations that share that geography. Today, I am truly honored to be on the stage to tell you a bit about the education initiative at the Bush Foundation. And we see it as part of a broader movement. Why a movement? Because we think that is what it's going to take to make education work for all of our students. But I'll get to that in just a bit. Actually, I would like to begin with the question. Did you love school? And I have a follow-up question. Did school love you? Did school love you? Now, when I ask that question, I'm not talking about were there caring adults in the buildings of the schools that you attended. I'm going to assume that there were plenty of teachers and principals and bus drivers and coaches and many more who loved the little adorable elementary school versions of yourself and the even maybe less adorable, surly adolescent versions. The question I'm asking, did school love you, is a question about how did the education you received see who you are? Did that education recognize how you learned best? And did that education prepare you for the future you wanted? Were you seen, your culture, your community? Now, I believe that a school that loves you is a school that sees you, all of you, the whole you. So before I go much further, I'd like to take a moment to tell you a little bit about myself and what has brought me to this work. This also brings me back to this question, did school love you? Because while I excelled at school, I'm not sure if my K-12 school experience actually loved me, which makes me sad because I was really primed for school. Let me tell you why. I was very lucky to be born into my family. My grandparents, Charlie and Addie Lawrence, are from a small town in the southern Boot Hill of Missouri. And in the early 1930s, they moved to St. Louis, and a few years later, they bought a house in East St. Louis, Illinois. Even though they left school before high school, they so believed in education. And my grandfather especially believed that education would be the vehicle by which his family would succeed. And that's why all 12 of their children, yes, 12, went to college. And among them, they have 12 bachelor's degrees, several master's degrees, and a PhD too. And you see, that wasn't supposed to happen for a Black family growing up in a tiny 3-bedroom house in the pre-civil rights era. But that's the power of education. It completely changed the trajectory of the lives of Charlie and Addie's 12 kids, and their kids, my siblings, cousins, and our kids too. Because my grandfather's commitment to and belief in education was passed along to their 12 kids, including my mom, Joanne. Now, Joanne is a former teacher, and my dad is a retired federal employee, and I should stop and say, I'm the one with the red bow and the goofy grin. And my parents aimed my siblings and me to aim high. And actually, it was my father who encouraged me to apply to Stanford. And being a mostly obedient daughter, I did. And I went there. And you know, it was the first time that I truly felt whole as a student. I majored in engineering, I minored in African American studies, and I was part of a dance company. My minor allowed me, for the very first time in a school setting, to learn about African American scholars and their works. So all of my interests and ambitions were being met. My identity was being valued. And when that happens, there's really no other way to describe it than feeling whole, feeling loved. You see, during the entirety of my K-12 school experience, I was not assigned a single book by an African American author, not one. Either my schools didn't think it was important for students of color to learn about their culture, or they didn't provide space for that to happen on an honors track. And that wasn't so long ago. But like I said, I was lucky to grow up in my family, and I had ability, and I was able to twist and contort and code switch whenever and wherever I needed to. I bet some of you know what I'm talking about. But you know, kids shouldn't have to be lucky, and they certainly should not have to twist and contort themselves to fit into a system. What if instead of forcing kids to fit into a system, our systems could adapt to all of our students? Beautiful children, emerging leaders, all of their talents, all their curiosities, whatever their abilities, whatever their backgrounds. What if our systems loved our kids? Since 2016, the Bush Foundation has focused its education initiative on making education more relevant for students in terms of who they are, how they learn, and where they want to go. This is called competency-based learning, personalized learning, customized learning. The label really doesn't matter. At the Bush Foundation, we call it student-centered learning. And I really love that label because we're talking about school. If students aren't at the center, then I think something must be wrong. And so by putting students at the center of our work, we stake out a belief in a community of educators who truly know our kids, who value all of them, their languages, their backgrounds, and all the things that make them unique, and who help them envision and prepare for a hopeful future filled with meaning. Is this a way to rethink education? Yes, it is. Is this a way to respond to a post-industrial economy? Sure, it certainly can be. But so much more than that, at the Bush Foundation, we believe that student-centered learning is a way to reclaim education. In this work, we must create ways for historically and currently marginalized communities to be a part of the improvement strategies in their own communities. Student-centered learning is about self-determination. It is key to social justice. In other words, at the Bush Foundation, we believe student-centered learning is about education equity. As I've said in the past, the Bush Foundation invests in great ideas and the people who power them. To wrap up my time here, I'd like to tell you about a few of those people who are working so that schools meet the needs of the whole child. One of our partnerships is with the School Leadership Project. They are an education strategy and support organization. It was founded by Katie Barrett Kramer and Dan Cooley, who are former teachers and school administrators. For the past few years, they have developed a program called the Learning Journey. This is a program that develops champions for the student-centered learning movement. During a month-long program, they take cohorts of educators, policymakers, and community leaders and show them just what it looks like when students are at the center of their education. They visit best practice school sites in the region and nationally, and then they develop action plans for leading change in their own schools and districts. The Learning Journey is a powerful program, and it has been effective in catalyzing change. I want to tell you about two participants who participated in the Learning Journey from last school year. First, Tiara Little. She was a member of a cohort of about 20 people who primarily serve schools in the Native nations in South Dakota and North Dakota. The Bush Foundation makes multiple investments in Native communities in order to improve education opportunities. Far too often, these students in these communities have been shortchanged by the education opportunities provided to them and the oppressive policies imposed upon them. But despite those challenges, Native leaders are achieving some truly great things in these settings, and Tiara is one of them. Tiara grew up in the Oceti-Sakowee territory, specifically in the Oglala Lakota Nation, which is one of the bands of the Greater Lakota Nation. This land is currently known as the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. She grew up mostly with her mother and her grandfather, who she called Papa, and her Papa encouraged her to seek out learning opportunities off the reservation so that she could figure out how the world worked and then return home and contribute to community growth. And that's what she did. Starting in the 6th grade, she spent every summer away from home. And eventually, like me, she attended Stanford. And then in 2017, she graduated, and she knew that it was time to come home. She now works for the Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation on the Pine Ridge Reservation. She's their manager of education development. Tiara participated in the Learning Journey, and she is a fellow with the Native American Community Academy Inspired Schools Network, also known as NISN, which is another grantee of the Bush Foundation. Tiara told me that these programs have been so valuable for her because it has allowed her to participate in an intergenerational leadership and vision setting. And she's part of a collective of Indigenous leaders and other valued-aligned movers and shakers. She's preparing to open a new independent school on the Pine Ridge Reservation, and this school will be grounded in Lakota language, culture, and art. It will include project-based learning, land-based learning, and community-engaged learning. And she's quick to stress that these aren't new ideas. This is reclaiming the Indigenous way of learning. And by reconnecting with these Indigenous values, it allows the students, their families, and the entire community to recognize and take steps towards healing from the trauma that was imposed on them by Indian boarding schools. This school will be different. This will be a school that will love its children. Finally, I'd like to tell you about DeMarcus Green. He also participated on a journey as part of a network of charter schools authorized by an organization in Minneapolis called the Pillsbury United Communities. DeMarcus is the director of facilities and finance at a charter school called the Minnesota Internship Center, or MINIC for short. While he is currently on the operations side, his background is in special education and general education as a behavior specialist and as a dean. The concept of student-centered learning comes completely natural for him. For when he worked with students, he always approached it with the belief that every student has a different story and every student has a different background, and he made it his mission to learn those stories in order to best serve them. The students enrolled at MINIC have struggled to thrive in school. Some are experiencing homelessness, others are teen parents, and others are facing other major challenges and distractions to learning, many of those situations completely outside of their control. But at MNIC, they are seen and they are supported in the way that they need in order to succeed. DeMarcus shared that a big part of his learning journey was being able to see schools in Nashville, big picture and rocket ship, that had levels of excellence and dedication that are awe-inspiring. Based on his experience on the journey, he and others at MNIC's leadership team immediately made transformative changes to their program. They ended a lease in a building that they had been housed in for years, and they found a new site that was truly worthy of their students. They did a major overhaul to make the space functional and beautiful, and they implemented components of project-based learning in the program. DeMarcus says that with the new changes, the students are absolutely thriving. They say that before, their non-traditional school felt less than the typical school. But now they're excited to be in a real school, and they're taking their education more seriously. DeMarcus often talks about how much he loves his work at MNIC, and I imagine that for many of the students there, MNIC is the first time the school has loved them. So this is just a portion of the education investments that the Bush Foundation makes. We are honored to play a small role in making education more relevant for students. And we know that to reach this goal, it's going to take a multifaceted approach in order to build a movement. We need educators and policymakers and innovators and a whole army of people who don't currently have a seat at the table and should in order to do this work. We need to serve the whole child, and we need to transform more schools and systems so that one day, more young people will be able to say, without hesitation, that yes, I loved school and my school loved me. Thank you.
Please welcome North Dakota State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kirsten Baesler.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Whenever someone learns that I'm from North Dakota, I'll hear generally one of two things. They'll look at me and they'll say, I've never met anyone from North Dakota before. And I'll say, well, now you have. Or they'll say, I've never been to North Dakota before. And I'll eagerly respond and say, well, you should visit, just not in January or February. So there are a lot of myths about North Dakota, and I want to dispel some of those myths today. North Dakota is rural, but to clarify, for us in North Dakota, being rural does not mean poor, and it certainly does not mean trapped. North Dakota boldly defies these and many other stereotypes. North Dakota is the only state in the nation that has grown younger in the past decade. In fact, our dominant generation in the state are 25 to 39-year-olds, which is likely why my student population is growing in this nation. Our population is rising faster than any other state in the nation, probably likely because of their very low unemployment rate at 2.4%. People generally know that our major industries in North Dakota are agriculture and energy. But we are so much more than that, and we're so much more than just the typical energy that most people think of in oil and natural gas. In fact, North Dakota has oil, natural gas, hydro, solar, and wind. A lot of wind. We are truly #all of the above when it comes to energy. So people generally know those things, but there are so many things that people do not know about North Dakota. For instance, Microsoft's second largest campus outside of Redmond, Washington is located in Fargo. Grand Forks has been designated a Department of Transportation, a U.S. Department of Transportation research center and test site for drones. We are the first state in the nation to adopt computer and cybersecurity standards for all of our grade levels K through 12. All of our school buildings in North Dakota have 1 gigabit connectivity. All of these factors likely play into the fact that Fortune magazine has dubbed North Dakota America's most undervalued tech hub. We have over 25 languages other than English spoken in our schools. The Roosevelt family has chosen Medora, North Dakota to be home of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. And for you football fans out there, we are home to Carson Wentz of the Philadelphia Eagles. We have some Eagles fans out there. It is important that we continue this work. It's important that we continue this innovation. Actually, the innovation and the success that we experience doesn't begin or end with our business economy or our economic growth. It actually starts in our schools. More and more frequently, I get asked questions like, what is going on in North Dakota? How are you all doing what you're doing? And what makes those initiatives successful? So I've really had to give that question some serious thought recently, because really, I didn't know. We were just doing it. We knew we had to do things differently because of our space and place, because we're located in the center of North America. But what I landed on and what I figured out was that it's our culture as a state that makes us unique, and it's what makes us possible for us to work together and move forward. The Department of Public Instruction has translated that culture into 3 fundamental pillars: build relationships, cultivate opportunities, and then inspire growth. North Dakota has a history of building strong communities that feed and fuel the world. Throughout our history, our children's education has been a priority for all North Dakotans. In fact, when our settlers first came to our state, the leaders did one of 2 things. They first built a church, and then they built a school. And that education remains a priority for all of us. Our North Dakota settlers had a true roll up your sleeves, work together, and get the work done type of spirit. Our work ethic is rooted in the greater good and serving others, which truly makes collaboration very natural for us. It only makes sense that the Department of Public Instruction continue to lead with that spirit today. We all know that the world is no longer rewarding our young people for what they know. Their cell phone, their iPad, an app simply has the answers of knowledge for them. The world is now only rewarding our young people for what they can do with what they know. So we had to ask as a state, how do we as a group of caring people committed to the students in North Dakota help change our system? The first thing that we needed to do was to remove the barriers to innovation. In 2013, as a state, we came together to begin to devise a plan to give our public schools the flexibility and local control to personalize learning needs of all of our students. Other states could provide this type of flexibility to charter schools, but charters are far less feasible in a rural and isolated state like ours. And so we asked, why not our public schools? So in 2017, a bipartisan group of North Dakota's elected leaders and a diverse education stakeholder group leveraged their relationships to turn their words into action by creating a waiver program to eliminate state barriers to innovation with the passage of Senate Bill 2186. We again brought our educational community together with some non-traditional partners this time to create a vision for K-12 education in North Dakota. This is the first time ever in our state's history that all K-12 educational stakeholders came together to decide a common set of goals and outcomes that we would all work toward together. Those involved in this work were students, parents, teachers, administrators, higher ed, business and community leaders, legislators, tribal leaders, and educational union leaders. This vision continues to come to life daily through actionable steps by all of our partners. When we do this work at the department, we authentically embrace the voices of our number 1 customer, our students. My first year in office, it became clear to me that there were long-standing communication opportunities for many of our stakeholder groups, but our students' voice was not among them. That was very different for me. My entire 24 years before that, I was in classrooms and school buildings and districts where when decisions were made, I had immediate feedback on whether it was working well or not. That gap had to close. So we created the first ever North Dakota State Superintendent Students Cabinet. This is not your traditional student council environment. It is not a nomination process, it's an application process. And the selection process ensures that students with good and not so good experiences with school serve as members. This helps us learn what is going well and things that we need to keep doing, but it also helps us learn what's not going so well and what we need to stop or change doing. Our cabinet of young people are in 4th grade through 12th grade, because when they leave our system as seniors and they graduate and go on to their life beyond our K-12 system, I need to hear about what worked well and what didn't. They meet quarterly, and our students drive the agenda. The members drive the agenda, and I ask them whether I can have permission to put something on their agenda that I need their advice on. I soon realized that we had another missing voice that I needed to hear more regularly: our family's voice. If schools are going to be successful, if we are going to be successful in this transformation, family engagement is not optional. It is, in fact, essential. And engaging those, for whatever reason, are disengaged is the most critical. Like our student cabinet, this group meets quarterly, and the agenda is driven by our family members. I truly believe if we could have done this work alone and created this transformation alone, wouldn't we have done it decades ago? If we could have done it alone, I would ask you, what are we all waiting for? One thing is important is that we never talk at these groups. We never expect them to come and sit and get from us. Instead, we intentionally listen and we absorb. This open and meaningful dialogue creates a clear line of communication and trust. It is said that transformation can only happen through relationships, and relationships only travel at the speed of trust. Much like our strong communities, North Dakota also has a history of cultivating opportunity. In 1922, when our farmers grew tired of shipping their grain to the Minneapolis elevators for lower prices, our leaders took bold action in establishing a state-owned mill and elevator. A conference like this highlights that we now live in an opportunity-rich society. So many opportunities to connect with people, to share ideas and best practices. And DPI prides itself in helping our local schools cultivate opportunities with local, state, and national partners for their students. One of the best examples of this type of partnership is the work being done with the Bush Foundation and Knowledge Works. 5 local school teams are pioneering personalized learning opportunities enabled by Senate Bill 2186. This is a thoughtful, deliberate, 5-year process-driven journey. This work will lead to a different pathway of student-centered education that can be scaled across North Dakota, ensuring that all students graduate choice-ready. One of these schools of particular equity importance is our Youth Correctional Center for our incarcerated students. Other opportunity examples that speak directly to the heart of equity include our consistent and frequent government-to-government tribal consultations with our 5 tribal nations that we share our borders with. This has led to a 15-point increase in Native American graduation rates since I took office, increasing from 57% to 72% and still climbing. We have increased opportunities for students and teachers through our partnership with the National Math Science Initiative, which has led to a 77% increase in the number of advanced placement courses taken in math, science, English, and computer science. The greatest increase occurred for students of color and students living in poverty. Our intentional partnerships with Microsoft Teals, Code.org, Palo Alto Networks, NYSERC, and ISTE, to have at least one teacher credentialed to teach computer science, coding, or cybersecurity in every school building K-12 is getting more and more girls involved in this high-paying career pathway. Our partnership with Hess's truck program is bringing STEM education and curriculum materials to every elementary school in our state. We're also breaking down barriers to partner with our regional education associations and our tribal council leaders to scale community in schools across North Dakota to help our students and their families. And our tremendous partnership with our sister agency, the North Dakota Department of Human Services, has brought the greatest policy reform in behavioral health services to our state since 1930. And stay tuned. Our next project with our state agency partners is to bring high-quality early learning opportunities to families in every zip code. But with all this progress and growth we have seen, we must not rest. We can and must strive for more. It is our responsibility as the state education agency to complete the transition from regulatory and punitive to inspirational support for transformation. Our ESSA plan's foundation is based on the premise that all of our schools are in improvement. We are all in continuous improvement. It just so happens that some of our schools will require and receive more support and technical assistance if they are in need of targeted or comprehensive support and improvement. We chose to take the shame and blame out of this work. Instead, we choose to support and inspire. And as we talk about inspiring growth, we all know leadership matters. Meaningful, transformative, sustainable change happens for these children only when strong leadership is present. As we look to redefine the delivery of education, North Dakota is investing time, energy, and dollars into the individualized learning needs of our principals, superintendents, and school board members, just as we are personalizing development of our students. And if we are truly going to be transformative, we must look at the way that we are measuring quality, success, and progress. So we are looking to create innovation zones of courageous schools to explore a different way to begin doing assessments for accountability. I believe that North Dakota's culture of building relationships, cultivating opportunity, and inspiring growth will lead to a world-class system of education for us because our children deserve it. Ever since I began serving in educational leadership roles, I have shared the story of the Maasai tribe, and I want to end my time today with you sharing that story. The Maasai tribe is probably the most famous of all of the tribes in Africa, and their warriors for centuries have been the most fearsome and the most intelligent. So it may surprise you when you learn that the traditional greeting among warriors translates into, "And how are the children?" The traditional response for these warriors is, "The children are well. All the children are well." Even warriors with no children of their own greet each other in this manner. And it's because they know in order to take the responsibility of being a defender of their tribe, of their village, they knew that they had to measure that quality based on their most vulnerable. It meant that there was enough food in the storage. It meant that there was no sickness or disease within the village. And it meant that the fortresses around and protecting them were safe and sound. I ask us, how might we change as a state, as a nation, as a world, if we began greeting each other in that same manner? If we began measuring the quality of our life, our nation, our state, our communities, based on how well our children are doing? Could we truly say all of our children are well? I'm not sure that I can say that all the children are well, but I can say that I am committed to doing everything possible with all the energy that I have to get one step closer. The original handcrafted Maasai warrior shield that you see in the picture was given to me as a gift, and it hangs in my office. It reminds us to lead each day with courage and commitment to our children. So wherever you are on your journey, within your own system, I'm sure you have realized that there is a lot to be done and a lot to overcome. And you may begin to wonder some days, is it worth it? But I urge you to answer that question with another. How are our children? Thank you.
Please welcome Virginia Superintendent of Public Instruction, James Lane.
Education includes collaboration. When we're working together, we're better at communication. Every teacher we have, planning together, teaching together, it makes us better. Remember, we're preparing for a job, not a test. Thanks for teaching us in the ways that we learn best. Let's mix English and math and science and history. That's the way that learning was meant to be. Adding technology, throwing the arts, put them together. Why should we learn them apart? It would be awesome if we solve real world problems that way. When we're older, we can solve them because we want.
So that's from a student named Justin in the western side of Virginia. And when we started our work to promote deeper learning in the state, we asked school divisions to send us examples of what they're working on. And Justin and his teacher, Cole, sent me that video. And so I appreciate you giving me a few extra seconds there because I promised them I was going to play that as my walk-up music every time I came on the stage. And at the end, I'll play more of it for you. And his song starts with, worksheet, worksheet, not another worksheet. Then he goes on to say, why don't you teach us how we learn best, right? And that is what is at the heart of Virginia's for Learners. Now, you've probably heard at some point of our Tourism Corporation slogan, Virginia is for lovers. And that was intended to encourage folks to come visit our beautiful beaches and mountains and the history of Virginia. But Virginia's for Learners is the Commonwealth's commitment to public education and a belief that our job is to tell the story of the great things going on in our public schools so that those people that come to visit Virginia will stay and bring their businesses with them because we are, based on CNBC, the #1 state for business. And inside the rankings for the #1 state for business, CNBC rated Virginia as #1 in 2 subcategories, education and the workforce. And so Virginia's for Learners is about making sure that we stay #1, but it's also about a commitment to making sure we're lifting up the students that need us the most, because that is how we're going to continue to move forward as a state. Now, when we started the major education reforms that we have done in Virginia over the last couple of years, it actually started before I arrived in 2018 with the adoption of new standards of accreditation, a new way of holding our schools accountable that looks at more measures. When we started that work, we realized our superintendents, our principals, our teachers knew what we were trying to do, but our parents, our business leaders had no idea. So we created Virginia's for Learners originally as a campaign to talk about all the amazing things going on in our schools. And so Virginia's for Learners is built on 3 pillars. The first is training our K-12 students to go deeper. And that is really what we're talking about here today. We created a profile of a Virginia graduate. You can find that online. And we focused on 5 critical skills. I'm going to talk about these in more detail in a moment. But critical thinking, creative thinking, communication, collaboration, and citizenship. I often say that the hardest part about being state superintendent is remembering those 5 things in front of a group. But what I will tell you is that when I began speaking to business leaders when I became a superintendent 10 years ago, all of their comments focused on the basic skills that students needed. We need kids that can read better, do basic math. And that's changed over the 10 years. And now business leaders say to me, you know what? Virginia kids are book smart. And as I often say, I will take that. But what we really need is for them to have these critical skills when they come in. And if they have these skills, we can teach students to do the work that we're doing. Next is I'm going to try to see if I can't get this thing to move forward. Is preparing our Virginia graduates for what comes next. And I will tell you that when I was a kid, like most people of my generation, I had a job in high school. And what we find now is that many kids don't have a job in high school like many of us had. They're busy. We have so much more homework now. We have so many more clubs and activities for students. There's so much for them to do. But when I go to see the places that kids typically worked when I was a kid, I see adults working in those roles. And so we've got a responsibility to make sure we create work-based experience for students so they can experience the real world in the classroom, so that when they go to the world of work, they know how to implement those skills that we're always talking about. We've got to move beyond content to those skills and create those work-based learning experiences. Now, the third piece of what we did in Virginia's for Learners is we made student success the highest standard. We fundamentally changed the way that we hold schools accountable. We added a focus on growth and not just achievement, because as a parent of a student who's likely going to pass our standards of learning test every year, I don't care if he's going to pass that test. I want to know where he was at the beginning of the year and whether they maximized what he could do towards the end of the year. And at a minimum, I want to know that he grew a year while he was with our teachers. We also have always measured achievement gaps, and we reported them based on the federal government requirements, but we never actually in our state accountability system held our schools accountable for closing achievement gaps. So the new system now focuses on racial equity for our students. We wanted to make sure that we recognized continuous improvement for our schools and didn't label our schools as failures, because we wanted to know that every school had something to work on. And so when we wanted to share this information with parents, and we wanted to get it to every parent in every corner of Virginia, we created a video series. I'm going to show you one very short, 45 to 60-second one. And we created a character, Mary Peak. Mary Peak was one of the first African-American educators in Virginia. She started a school on what is now Hampton University. And Mary Peak is going to tell you a little bit about our work.
Have you heard the news? Virginia has implemented major reforms to its public education system. These reforms are the first overhaul of Virginia's system in 20 years. They are focused on measuring what matters, driving continuous school improvement, and ensuring that every Virginia graduate is life ready. The new accreditation system emphasizes closing achievement gaps between student groups and provides a more comprehensive view of school quality. To facilitate deeper learning, beginning in pre-K, students will begin developing future-ready skills through personalized instruction. By the time a Virginia student graduates, he or she will have explored career paths and experienced work-based and service learning programs to prepare them for what's to come next after high school. Today's economy requires people to be critical thinkers, collaborators, communicators, creative thinkers, and community-minded citizens. These skills are collectively known as the 5 C's. To ensure that every Virginia student attends a school that maximizes their potential and prepares them for life beyond high school. Additional information is available on the website virginiaisforlearners.virginia.gov, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook.
Now, the reason that we created these videos is because imagine the power of the work that we're doing, all of us trying to build these deeper learning experiences, these competency-based experiences, these personalized and mastery learning experiences for students. Imagine if our parents could communicate as clearly as we can on why we're doing it. And so you see we have our 5 C's graphic. Feel free to borrow that if you'd like. But we also went through each of the 5 skills areas and clearly defined what that looks like in the classroom. So for critical thinkers, as you'll see, I'm not going to read them all to you, but we want our students to be able to reason and make inferences. We want them to be able to reflect on their own thinking. As collaborators, certainly we want them to be able to work together, but we want them to value each other, the diversity and the opinions of every student in the classroom. As communicators, we want to make sure they're learning to actively listen, because they can talk plenty in class, for those of y'all that are teachers. You know I'm kidding. We want them to be creators. At the end of the day, the future economy in our world is going to be with the entrepreneurs. And we want our students to have those experiences every day in school. And so we don't have to just talk about what these skills are. We have to build them into our standards and our assessments so students have opportunities to experience this learning. And everyone typically has at least those first four C's. In Virginia, we added community-minded citizens. But we also focus on global citizenship. We also focus on work citizenship. So students don't just think of citizenship as character and being ready for school every day, but the type of activities that they'll need to do when they get into the workplace. So why are we doing this work? Why are we focused on this more deeper learning focused education in Virginia? Well, really, it's all about equity. And you can probably tell what generation I'm from, because Jay-Z's music was huge when I was in school. But he talks about how everyone is born with genius level talent, right? Think about if we thought about all of our children that way every day, that all of our children had some genius level talent and our job was to cultivate it, how much we would think about personalizing the experience for that student so that they could grow those talents, right? What if we thought about how if everything that we did was about maximizing their potential and not about whether they could pass a test, but actually it's about seeing how far they could go with their learning. Now, people ask me, well, what are you doing for equity? And I say, well, I can tell you some of the things we're doing, but equity is not necessarily a strategy. It's a lens that we put on everything we do, from our hiring to our policies, to our finances, to our resources, to make sure that we're lifting every child up. Because, and I don't know what your state looks like, but I guarantee if you created a map of your state, it would look like this. And just for quickly analyzing it, blue is good and red is bad. So for all of our students, we're doing pretty well as a state. Our Asian students are doing well. Our Caucasian students are doing well. But we have some significant achievement gaps. And you don't see that until you really look inside it. And then you look at where, and you look at it county by county. But the most shocking piece is, for our students with disabilities, or English language learners, if we don't include growth, none of our school communities are having the impact with those students that we want. So that's why we have to focus on deeper learning, because the way that we've taught them with rote memorization doesn't work for all students. We have to make sure we're really engaging them, really getting them excited about learning if we're actually going to maximize their potential and have them ready for state assessments. So how are we going to build this culture in Virginia? Well, first, leadership matters, right? You have to set a vision no matter where you are, whether you're a teacher in the classroom, a parent, or an advocate in this room, or the superintendent of your state. You have to set a vision that every child matters and that we're going to create learning experiences that makes them excited to come to school every day. If you work at the state level like I do, we've focused on becoming what we call the Tower of Yes. If you've ever dealt with your State Department, we have a tower, that's actually our building, and we're on the top floor of that huge building, tallest building in Virginia. We were referred to as the Tower of No, because every time somebody wanted to innovate and they asked us at the state level, we had a reason or a policy that was preventing it. But when I got there and the superintendent before me, I can tell you we looked at those regulations, and there's plenty of flexibility to do what we wanted to do. So we turned that Tower of No into a Tower of Yes, because we want to drive innovation in our state. One of the ways that we do that, it was grants, pilots, and flexibility. I saw some teachers here that came up to me yesterday that said they're from Code RVA. Shout out to Code RVA. We gave $50,000 grants for high school innovation. $50,000 will barely buy anything to innovate your school, but it was the permission to move forward and ask for flexibility and waivers. And so Code RVA is a new school in Virginia where it's based on three pillars. It's equitable, because the students in that school are a mere reflection of the nearly 15 school divisions that partner to regionalize that school. It's built with a focus, obviously, on computer science so that students have a real skill when they graduate. It was built on a focus on personalized learning so that every student had a personalized pathway through school, and every student in that school has the opportunity to graduate with a 2-year degree, and in their last couple years of high school, they work in a paid internship so that when they graduate, and they get promoted along the way, when they graduate, they have 1 or 2 years of work experience, and they can either go right into work or onto a degree. But the key, as Kirsten said, is family engagement. We have to have our parents longing for and begging for these richer and more engaging experiences if they're going to be institutionalized. You have to reach your parents and share with them why this work is so important, because when the parents are clamoring for it, it will become a part of everything that we do. We can put it in our standards, we can change our assessments, but if you want it to be there for the long haul, it has to be understood by every member of your community. And leverage the technology that's open to you. Because remember that technology is a tool, not a goal. So many times I see districts celebrating their new technology enhancements and calling it innovation. But innovation is both new and better. But so many times we think of innovation as the new thing. The other thing that I will say is don't be afraid of technology either. Because when the pencil became the new tool for the chalkboard teacher or however, slate or whatever they were doing, I can tell you that the pencil didn't change the classroom. But the pencil was the tool that allowed teachers to do something different. And so think of the technology available to you in the same way. And then lastly, you have to build capacity. If you're a district that's just taking on this deeper learning focus, it will not change overnight. It's a new paradigm, and you need to think about it differently. And like Kirsten talked about assessments, we often have to think differently about the way we evaluate folks, because we can't ask our teachers to do this more innovative type of learning and still hold them mostly accountable for test scores based on old rules. We've got to make sure that we build innovation networks. We're partnering with Advanced Learning Partners and Ted Dintersmith and others, and we built an innovation network of 26 school districts that are taking this work on first and building it to capacity. And in that first year, when we brought those first 26 school divisions in, 52 applied. And now we're going to be well over 70 interested. And we're creating what Ted loves to call innovation playlists, because you don't have to do the same thing as your neighbor next door, but you do have to think about how you can make your classrooms better. And there are many ways to go about that. But really, in closing, the big challenge I want to leave with you is to make sure you tell your own story. I work very closely with the media all the time. And the media is more likely to run a story about a fight or a late bus than all this amazing work that we're doing. But if I have 1.3 million students, then theoretically I have 2.6 million parents or guardians, which means that there are nearly 4 million people that I get to communicate with every day, which is a more powerful audience than anywhere in the media. But imagine if every educator in this nation, if every educator in your state, or even every educator in your school was telling your story, how much more powerful the work that we were doing would be. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave you with Justin.
All period, want some more fun, every lesson serious. What does this have to do with the real world? How is this gonna help me in the real world? Put your hand down and keep writing. School's not supposed to be exciting. What if school was a place that was all about...
Thank you. We're going to do a quick Q&A, but there are some questions that I do want to probe on, and I'm going to start with our two state chiefs. So historically, state departments of education, well, they haven't been known as the most, they've been more compliance agencies than engines of change and catalysts of innovation, but I think it's really important to pull out of both of your presentations that we heard innovation zones, we heard an emphasis on doing assessment differently, and we saw some of that performance assessment. We saw holistic models of student success, different frames for quality in both of them, driving initiatives in student-centered learning, personalized learning, in competency-based learning, the high schools of innovation, and networks for practitioners leading innovation. I mean, that's a common thread throughout this. When you're out and you're hearing from educators, practitioners in your state, what are the questions that you hear from people asking you as the state chief?
Thank you, if you don't mind, James. So that is such a great question, and I'm glad we're able to lead with that. So there's some assurance that they want from state education agencies about, is this too going to go away? Why should we invest in this? And what are you going to do to support what we're doing? Because what they're doing is hard work. I mean, it's that hard work at all levels. You can't, there's a lot of plates spinning in the air to get this work done. And so they really want, they ask us, when will this go away? When will we swing that pendulum back? Because for 15 years, they were wound up pretty tight under regulation and compliance. No Child Left Behind brought us a great sense of a better lens on equity, but it also taught us to be very compliant driven. So now we're asking the mindset to change of our educators to not focus on compliance. We're not asking our students to be focused on compliance, but they want to know from me, so what are you doing to help us not be focused on compliance?
Yeah, I actually completely agree with that, but I'll add, most departments of ed after the recession significantly had to cut their budgets. And so you had a much deeper focus on coaching before the recession, but when those cuts happened, the numbers of staff in the departments became so small, they had to focus on compliance because it's really all they had time to do. But the other big thing that I hear them ask is if they can have permission to do these things. You know, that when the state superintendent says, let the standards of learning, or whatever standards for your state, be the byproduct of great teaching, but really go after innovation, they get really excited. But you know, they'll ask, well, are you really saying that, or are you just saying that because it's a talking point? And so for us, we've got to take that feedback and know that they're reticent, but we have to think of ways that we can institutionalize these reforms. And part of that is making sure that if we're going to talk about the 5 C's, with every standards revision for every curriculum, we've got to be embedding these skills. With every assessment, we've got to be thinking about new ways to do it. And where there's possibility, we have to build flexibility and highlight and promote that flexibility with divisions.
And there are pieces that are showing that you're thinking about assessment differently. Can you just remark on that real quickly?
Go ahead.
So that's what we're at is we're talking about measuring growth, and each student reaches a different stage at their development in life. But the way that our accountability system is set up is we are measuring a very narrow grade band of skills. And so even though a child may come into your 8th grade classroom, into your 8th grade math classroom, you could get them at a 3rd grade level, and they need those foundational math skills. They take them from that 3rd grade math level to 7th grade math level, yet they're being measured on that 8th grade band of competencies, and that's not okay. So what we're going to do is we're hoping to focus in, thank you. It is actually encouraging bad instruction. I will just say that. It is encouraging bad instruction because that 8th grade math teacher is being expected to teach 8th grade math competencies. And as we know, math is so cumulative. If they have those holes, they're not going to be able to get it. So we're looking for courageous school districts to say, I'm going to take, and on top of everything else that we're going to do in our school district, we're going to look at doing accountability and assessment differently. I will provide them some cover, if you will, to say we're going to focus on growth, not growth within a state assessment, but true growth of skills and knowledge.
Yeah. And we're doing very similar work, but I will also share that we have decided specifically to focus on reducing the number of assessments that our students take that are state-driven. When we started this work in Virginia, one gubernatorial term ago, we had 34 state assessments across 4 subject areas. They passed legislation that reduced that to 29. But what we did as part of that is when we removed those first 5 state assessments, we asked school districts to go and innovate and build the types of more authentic assessments that they wanted for students. And then we took that further in 2017, where we essentially put a rule in place that once you earn what we call a verified credit in a subject area, you no longer have to take any of the state assessments in that subject area ever again. And so we asked our teachers and our principals and our leaders to take that new opportunity and build out more innovative assessments there. And then, you know, part of the logic model is that once we can show this new and more authentic assessment, how it's more impactful for students, better for their mental health, better for us to learn more about what they're doing, then we can go to, you know, even more assessments and reduce. But, you know, ultimately we still do have this federal requirement in grades 3 through 8 once in high school for reading and math. And so we're going to focus on building our capacity where we have flexibility and advocating for more policy changes.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see how it's the communities that are driving that push towards authentic performance assessment all across Virginia. And it felt like once it started getting on with 6 districts and 12 districts, that there's a lot of energy and that network building capacity. Coming back to the communities, like what we're seeing across the US is this work is really being led by communities wanting something different for their youth, wanting different learning experiences. Jackie, this has been the heart of your work and your career, and also in the work across 3 different states of the Bush Foundation. So are there examples, or what is the path forward to bridge this work past the, to the future with embedding communities deeply in the work of change?
Yeah, Susan, I love that you asked that question about how to involve communities more. As I mentioned in my remarks earlier, I think that there really is a void right now, and we could do so much more with education improvement if we involve the communities that we are working to serve. And so I gave a couple examples in my remarks of Tierra and DeMarcus, and they're just 2 of a dozen that, 20, 40 that I could have talked about in different capacities. Sometimes it isn't someone who's going to start a new school, but it could be a classroom teacher who is doing some very innovative things in order to reach the students that are in the seats in front of them. But when I think about the path forward, I think about 3 things. First of all, around community engagement and making sure that it is respectful community engagement. It takes time to do community engagement well. I mean, I spent most of my career working for public school districts, and so I get that. And sometimes it can be easy to want to just check the box. But when community engagement is done well, and I know this from experience, it is just so much better. It's important to getting the right results. It's important to getting buy-in, and also it's important because it's right. And it's just the right thing to do is to involve the community. And I think that when we do that, we need to make sure that we're being flexible and that we are understanding the context and the situations and the harm and the hurt that some of our families have experienced with conventional school districts. And so I think that making sure that we're not constrained by dominant cultural norms, and also so that we understand that parent engagement looks different for a lot of different parents, but we should absolutely be grounded in the belief that all parents want something great for their students. Even if it looks different, all parents want something great for their students. And I think just really quickly, the other 2 points are taking time to look internally, putting a mirror up and saying within our organization, do we have the right perspectives around the table? Who's making decisions? And are those perspectives that are making decisions, do they reflect the key stakeholders that we're serving? And are we doing all that we can to make sure that it's more than just community forums, but also the people that are on staff, who are on the advisory boards, who are on the board of directors, reflect those perspectives? And then finally, I would say, making sure that we're engaging students in an authentic way. At the foundation, we're still trying to figure that out, but one of my most rewarding projects that I did when I worked for St. Paul Public Schools was creating an engagement board of high school students who we didn't say, what do you think about this? Instead, we said, we empowered them by helping them learn about youth participatory action research, and now they create their own projects. They talk to their peers, they figure out what's important, and they figure out, this is what we need to do in order to make our district better. So I think making sure that we have authentic student voice. So thinking about that respectful community engagement, what you can do internally, and then increasing student voice.
Yeah, thank you. I know from when you look across the map of the United States and you see how competency-based pathways are taking hold in personalized learning, that the work that you're doing, where you're leading with who students are, and leading with the cultural responsiveness and leading with inclusivity, is really leading the nation in thinking about how true learner-centered, student-centered work can take hold. And it's just an honor to have all 3 of you with us today. Thank you so much. Join me in thanking our panel. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of your day. This evening, we'll have our networking reception outside under the palm trees and stars and beautiful palm strings. So enjoy your sessions. Thank you.